to allow a Teams or remote appearance by one of the plaintiff's witnesses. Is there any objection to that?
No objection.
That's granted. I'm not going to sign an order. It'll be in the minute entry, but you make the arrangements. You said it would be like 2 o'clock this afternoon?
2 o'clock, Your Honor.
It may wind up that winds up being out of order, whatever. I'm going to rely on you to tell me we need to remember that to take him.
Will do, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. With that in mind, as far as witnesses, how many witnesses are there total that we'll be hearing from plaintiffs? And who are they?
Your Honor, we have Jacqueline Onikeet,
The 3 affiants?
Chris Hansel,
Yes.
Shelby Bush, Andrew Myers, that's the witness appearing by video today, and plaintiff's expert, Eric Spikeen.
Okay.
Your Honor, we
Yes.
are also calling Ray Valenzuela today, this afternoon.
I believe they were going to call him, but if they don't, you are.
We're going to call him, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. For defendants?
Your Honor, we're also going to call Ray Valenzuela, who is the client representative of Maricopa County. Please stand. Sir, Ray Valenzuela.
Very well. Thank you. Okay. So there is a current motion that was filed yesterday in a response that I've reviewed that is seeking to exclude plaintiff's expert, Mr. Specken. You've asked for oral argument, but and I can hear from you each. Let me give you the benefit of what I think based on what you've written. I don't know that you're going to give me something that you haven't written by way of oral argument, but my view of it is that rather than wholesale excluding somebody, I look to evaluate. It's a bench trial. It's not like I'm being a gatekeeper to prevent something that I can't later undo in terms of the witness's testimony being heard by the trier of fact. So to that end, I think I have the tool of cross-examination that's available. And my inclination is more to hear the evidence and give it the weight I deem appropriate. And across the board in this case, that's been the approach that I've taken for this trial. You may have inferred that from the rulings that I've had so far. Given that, is there anything that plaintiff wants, or excuse me, the defendants, what's your motion that you want to add to the?
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing to add, understand, and we're ready to proceed.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Fine, Your Honor.
okay,
Nothing.
thank you.
As a matter of housekeeping, though, Judge,
Yes.
I don't know who's a witness, who isn't, on behalf of all defendants. We want to invoke the rule of exclusion.
Very well.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so if you're not a party or a party representative and you are a witness, then you need to leave the courtroom. That's what that means. So, is there anybody that falls in that category? I don't know these people by face, so I'm asking lawyers.
Your Honor, normally an expert witness is allowed.
Mr. Specken?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's news to me, Judge.
What, that an expert can,
Well, if he hasn't, we don't know that he's going to be qualified as an expert. He's going to be a witness. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen, but I think he should be excluded with the rest of the witnesses.
okay,
He will not be called as a fact witness.
okay. So that narrows it. Either he's called as a witness and it's as an expert witness, or he's not called at all. So to that extent,
Fair enough.
he can be here.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then are we ready to begin? Plaintiff, You ready today? Defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
And I'm going to take Mr. Liddy's response as to all defendants.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Do you want to make an opening after everything I've read?
I would, Your Honor.
Very well. You are allowed to do that. And then the defendants, you have the option of making an opening, if you will, after that, or you can wait till your case in chief, as you well know. Okay? Mr. Olson.
May I approach the podium?
Yes, you may.
Good morning, Your Honor. Mail-in ballots are, quote, the largest source of potential voter fraud, end quote. That statement comes from the 2005 bipartisan Jimmy Carter James Baker Commission report entitled Building Confidence in U.S. Elections. That statement holds true today, just as it did when that commission made that statement in 2005. Making sure the voter's signature on the ballot envelope matches the voter's record signature is one of the most important security features to ensure that the ballot that is being cast by the legitimate voter and not a fraudulent ballot. It's critical to mail-in voting. The evidence that you will see today shows that Maricopa is counting hundreds of thousands of ballots without performing signature verification as required by ARS 16550 or Maricopa's own procedures that they train their signature verification workers in. This isn't a question of not doing it well enough. They're simply not doing signature verification. Maricopa received a flood of 1.3 million ballots in the 2022 general election. They did not employ the resources necessary to perform signature verification in the time that was allotted. The evidence will show that the signatures were either not reviewed at all or that the signature verifiers were simply clicking through the computer screen and moving on to the next ballot without doing any cross-reference to the record signature. In fact, record data produced by Maricopa shows that dozens of signature verifiers were simply clicking through the signature comparison images on their computer screen as fast as they could tap the keyboard. That is not verifying signatures, Your Honor, in accordance with Arizona law. The evidence will also show that Maricopa monitored each one of its signature verifiers and thus knew exactly what they were doing. They could monitor the rate at which signatures were being processed. They could monitor the number of ballots or signatures that were being processed through the day. They could monitor whether they were being rejected or accepted. And Your Honor, I'd like to show you exactly what I'm talking about. If you could call up the video. Your Honor, what's going to be on the screen is an actual capture of the live feed from MTech during the 2022 general election of the signature verification function. No input here.
Just working on it. Just demonstrative.
And Your Honor, we blurred his face in this video, but we have the actual original that's unaltered.
I'm right on one. You gotta switch it. That's same. That's what I get.
That's it, right before.
Your Honor, I'm going to continue on. We will be showing that video. Unless it's coming up now.
Your Honor, in opening, he can show as a demonstrative, but whether he's going to show it later would be up to you whether it's admissible or not.
Sure.
Understand?
It's not,
So what that bit,
Cool, we got it.
okay.
again, Your Honor, this is a live feed capture from the 2022 general election. If you look at the monitor on the left, you'll see this is a level 1 signature review, just clicking through images. He's clicking through them at a rate of less than 3 seconds per image, not conducting any signature review at all. If you notice, if you zoom back out a little bit, to the right, the signature reviewer is scrolling up and down. That is, you will hear testimony that that's the testimony, or that is the way that the signatures are reviewed. The signature on the ballot envelope appears on the screen, and then the signature verifier has to scroll down to check it with the record signature. As you see the screens flash again up and down, there's simply no way to review signatures, as our expert will testify. This isn't a question of not getting it right. It's simply they are not physically capable of reviewing the signature, both from the standpoint of being able to do an assessment with respect to the procedures, but also with respect to the functionality of the computer. When the images, you have to scroll down to check the record signature. You don't see the scrolling down function. What that log data shows, Your Honor, is that over 274,000 ballots were approved at less than 3 seconds each. That includes one signature verifier who approved 100% of the 26,900 signatures that he verified at less than 3 seconds a signature. Maricopa's log file data shows that 11 of these signature verification workers approved 170,000 signatures at a rate of less than between 0 and 2.99 seconds with a 99.97% approval rating. That's not signature review, Your Honor. Simply flashing a signature on the screen, clicking a button and moving on is not signature review. As I said, the evidence will show that Maricopa knew exactly what was going on. They could monitor each of their workers and, in fact, told them that they were being monitored. Contrary to what counsel has said before, signature verification is not an art. You don't look at signatures like a Picasso and decide whether you like it. There are specific steps that Maricopa trains its signature reviewers in. In fact, there's 11 steps to analyze different aspects of a signature to determine whether or not it's a match. This is as much a science with set procedures. And the whole purpose of those set procedures are to take out the subjectivity of that evaluation. In fact, you pull up Exhibit 1. This is the Secretary of State's, then Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, her guide, published in July 2020. Page 13. 13.
One next year.
And you'll see, Your Honor, step one, the signature's broad characteristics identifies 6 different characteristics of a signature. This is what signature verifiers are trained in. And then you can go down to step 2. These are the local characteristics. That's 5 local characteristics for a total of 11 characteristics that are to be evaluated to be considered a signature verification. Flashing up on a screen and moving to the next one without taking the steps necessary to verify is not signature verification under any measure. And at a rate of over less than 3 seconds to evaluate, that is not signature verification. Before all signature verifiers go through and begin on the election, they go through training that lasts a week, Your Honor. 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. It's actually quite good for the function that they are being tasked to perform. You will hear live testimony of 2 whistleblowers who, one, Jacqueline Onikit, who was a level 1 signature verification worker, and Andrew Myers, whose primary function was curing. Curing the ballot is after the signature has been rejected, then there is an attempt made, and this is per statute, to contact the voter to see if you can make sure that the signature is with who it's supposed to be. Both of these witnesses testified that the process that Maricopa set up for signature review, they had 24 workstations at level 1 review, 24. Maricopa had 3 level 2 reviewers. That's a ratio of just 1 level 2 reviewer to 8 level 1 signature reviewers. As the level 1 reviewers would reject signatures, it would be passed up to the level 2. You will hear testimony, Your Honor, sworn testimony, that the level 2 reviewers were so overwhelmed with rejected signatures that they would then have to check with even more resources than the level 1 had to see if they could determine that in fact it was the actual voter's signature, that they were so overwhelmed that they would not perform the level 2 review. They would simply kick back those rejected signatures back to the level 1. They wouldn't do it at all. And you will hear testimony that this was ordered by the managers at MTech. So that's the second part of this. First part, simply clicking through the computer screen like a woodpecker and moving on to the next ballot in less than 3 seconds. And secondly, the fact that the level 2 reviewers were so overwhelmed that they were kicking back rejected signatures that had been sent up to them without looking at them at all, kicking them back to level 1. That's not signature review. As Mr. Myers will testify, he expected, based on what he was told to cure, that there would be 12 to 15,000 ballots for the curing function every day. He was told there's so many coming in, it's going to be a flood. He only saw 10% of that, which meant that on average, there were approximately 10,000 signatures for level 2 reviewers to cure. As he said, the math never added up. There is simply not enough time in the day to perform the signature review function. And again, the log data supports that. There's 70,000 ballots, Your Honor, signatures, that were approved at a rate of less than 2 seconds. This is what Maricopa's own log data shows. You will also hear testimony today from Shelby Bush. Ms. Bush is the president of We the People Arizona Alliance. This is a group that's been focused on election integrity. It has been tasked by the Arizona Senate to perform investigations on their behalf. They have data analysts. They have actual people who have been trained in Maricopa's signature review procedures, and they conduct their own training. And this is much of which has been all directed by the Arizona Senate or the Senate President, then Senate President, Karen Fann, to review signatures and to see what is going on with the process at Maricopa. They received, at the behest of the Senate, the 2020 ballot envelope signatures and the actual record signatures that Maricopa employs. Their review that they've conducted in exact accordance with Maricopa procedures shows that approximately 9.9% of the ballots they've reviewed, and it's well over 200, well, about 700,000 now, but 9.9% are egregious mismatches. Another 12% would not pass Maricopa's standards for signature review. The purpose of this, Your Honor, when you're not performing signature review or signature verification, as we just talked about, that means the system becomes vulnerable to fraud. This extrapolated out of 20% of mismatched signatures making it into the process and being tabulated equates to over 239,000 ballots in the 2022 general election. When you don't do signature verification, this is what happens. That's the consequence of just clicking on a screen and moving to the next ballot at less than 3 seconds an image, and even less than 2 seconds an image. I mentioned that the review showed that approximately 20% of the 2020 ballot images did not match. This isn't about relitigating 2020, but it's about showing a failed process. And that evidence corroborates that the process has failed. And just as A.G. Bronovich noted, in 2020, Maricopa, out of 1.9 million ballots, they rejected just 587 signatures. That's not signature review. You will also hear expert testimony by plaintiff's expert Eric Spakeen. He has testified in over 400 trials and depositions as an expert on handwriting analysis. He has testified in connection with the evaluation of mass numbers of signatures in the context of elections, in the context of mass torts. He will give testimony on that it is impossible, not that you might get it okay or it might be, it is impossible to review a signature in less than 3 seconds. This isn't about whether it's 30 seconds to get it good enough or 10 seconds, that it is simply not possible to review a signature at that rate when it's done on scale. He has over 30 years of experience in evaluating signatures in a variety of cases. His opinion is that signature verification was either not performed at all or was simply clicking through in a sham process where the signature verification workers were just clicking through the screen. Your Honor, there are huge questions in the public about the integrity of the process. This issue, which again, mail-in balloting is the single greatest potential source of fraud. The evidence here today will show a failed process where no actual signature verification is being performed. On some ballots it is. But the question before your court, before your honor today, is whether no signature verification was being performed on a mathematically determined sufficient number of votes to set aside the election. As I said, Maricopa's own log data shows that over 264,000 ballots were reviewed at a rate of less than 3 seconds. 70,000 at a rate of less than 2 seconds. In addition, testimony that the level 2 reviewers were so overwhelmed that they simply didn't look at the signatures that were piling up on their desk. They simply kicked them back for the level 1 reviewers to take another look at. That's not signature review, Your Honor. Close.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Would the defendants like to make opening statements now or later?
Right now, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thomas Liddy for Maricopa County Defendants.
Need this?
No. All I need is this. ARS 16550. That's why we're here, Your Honor, after your ruling. 15 county recorders. They have to determine if the signature is inconsistent. Determine if the signature is inconsistent with the elector's registration record. 15 county recorders are elected to do that, among other duties. And we're here today because somebody thinks in Maricopa County they didn't do it. And that's their burden. And you just heard their opening statement that no actual signature verification was done, but for some it is. Some it is. Not that it wasn't done at all, but there was a showing in the video of a failed process. Well, Your Honor, we're not here over the next 3 days to challenge a process. You're going to challenge a process, you got to do that after the process is set, before the election starts. You already ruled on that. So we're not here to defend a challenge to the process. We're here to determine whether Maricopa County, under its recorder and the team that he assembled, under 16550A, made a determination that signatures were inconsistent with the elector's registration record. And Your Honor, you will hear from Ms. Lake's whistleblowers, who will actually be the marching band for Maricopa County. And they will testify that they, in fact, were part of the process that did do signature verification. They were hired. You'll hear they were trained in the classroom and in practicum, that they executed their duties in accordance with their training, and that they weren't alone. There were others doing it with them. And you will hear that there were other levels from their own witnesses. Level 2 managers would review it. Under Reyes, there's no requirement to have handwriting experts looking for matches and loops and all that sort of thing, because it doesn't require, according to Reyes, quote, does not require any special expertise on the part of the person making the comparison. The statute merely requires that the comparison is made, and that each county recorder in the 15 counties does it. The evidence just shown in the demonstrative is evidence that it was made. Now, if in fact that video showed 2 individuals, you're going to learn, Your Honor, hear from the evidence that there's 153 others, not just those 2. Now, on those 2, you couldn't see the screen. I would ask the court to take the video for what it is, not for what counsel says it is. Can't see the screen. But if, in fact, the individual on the left was not doing his job, and as you've heard from counsel in his opening that all 155 level 1 signature reviewers were being monitored by their supervisors. That individual would have been taken off the line. And Your Honor, you're going to hear that that individual was taken off the line. So, Your Honor, let's keep it simple. Did Maricopa County fulfill its obligations under its recorder and the team he assembled to execute their duties as defined by the Arizona legislature under 16550 to determine whether the signatures were inconsistent? And if so, they're accepted and moved on to level 2. There's no law that requires that there be anything beyond level 1. But Maricopa County, you're going to hear evidence that there's level 1, level 2, and level 3. Extraordinary Herculean effort, which Maricopa County proudly accepts, because when 1.3 million people turn out to vote, it's not a flood, it's a great day. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Plaintiff, your first witness will be?
Your Honor, the plaintiffs will call Jacqueline Oyeki.
Ms. Franco? Ma'am, if you could just come up in front of the clerk here, raise your right hand and she'll swear you in. Thank you. Ma'am, if you make your way around to the witness stand and have a seat, please. Thank you. You may begin when you're ready. If from there or the podium, either one.
Sure. Good morning, Ms. Oyeki.
Good morning.
Would you please state your full name and address? Actually, just your full name for the record.
Okay. My name is Jacqueline Onakite.
Could you maybe move that microphone closer or move the chair, one of the two, because you're a little soft-spoken.
Yeah, short. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Better?
Is it better? I can hear, but I'm very close.
Here, Your Honor.
Maybe pull the microphone just a little bit closer.
I'll be careful.
Is that better?
Yes.
Sorry.
Very well. That may be the best we can do. Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Ms. Onakite, what is your general understanding of why you are here to testify today?
I'm here to testify on the signature verification process.
And is that the signature verification process that you performed for Maricopa County?
Correct.
Do you live in Arizona now?
No, we just moved to Colorado Springs about 7 days ago.
Okay. How long did you live in Arizona before that?
27 years.
Do you have any political leanings or anything like that, one way or the other?
No, I do not.
What party are you registered?
I'm registered as a Republican, but I have voted Democrat.
And when you've voted Democrat before, who have you voted for?
Obama?
When did you become active in the election process in Maricopa County?
Probably when I started hearing back in 2020, there was a lot of information coming out about the elections not being valid. And so I started getting involved and trying to find out how I could get involved and help so that I could see for myself
Why did you want to get involved in Maricopa's election process?
I'm doing this for my children. I have 5 children and, 9 grandchildren, and I want their vote to count.
How many elections did you work in for Maricopa County?
I worked for the primaries and the general. I'm sorry.
You okay, man? If you need a break.
No, I'm fine. I'll be okay.
Do you have water?
No, sir.
Would you like?
Do you want water? We've got a bottle.
Yes, please.
We'll get that for you. Go ahead and continue, Miss. You can approach.
Thank you, sir.
You said you became involved in the Maricopa primary. Was that in 2022?
Yes, sir.
And that was the first time you became involved in the Maricopa election process, other than voting?
Correct.
Why did you decide, or strike that? How did you come to be involved in the signature verification process at Maricopa?
I found out where I could apply to become part of the process, so I went on the Maricopa website and applied for different positions for ballot adjudication, ballot processing, and signature verification, and I was called in for signature verification to work.
When you say you were called in because Maricopa accepted an application,
Correct.
and that was in the summer of 2022 before the primary?
Yes.
And what is your understanding of the purpose of signature verification?
To verify that in the past history that their signatures match, and to verify it's the correct voter.
Did you go through any training for signature verification put on by Maricopa County?
Yes, I did. Celia Neighbor trained us for approximately 5 days, and then we also had a full day of training from a signature specialist named, I think her name was Catherine or Kathleen.
Who is Celia Neighbor?
She's the director for signature verification and ballot processing at MTech.
MTech meaning Maricopa County.
Yes.
And can you kind of describe in a little bit more detail the type of training that you're referring to? Was this classroom instruction?
Correct.
And how long did it go for?
We usually started our day at 9:30 in the morning and ended either at 3:30 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon.
And did you receive any training materials to take home with you or anything and to review?
I did receive training material, yes.
Did you provide copies to council of those training materials?
Correct, yes.
I'd like to pull up Exhibit 8A.
Which exhibit are we looking at?
8A, Your Honor. And Your Honor, 8A is a rather large document that might be easier to authenticate if I was able to hand the witness a hard copy.
It's all one. The clerk has pointed out to me that they don't bifurcate 8A, B, and subparts. It's Exhibit 8, and it's to be one exhibit. Is that your understanding? This was the exhibits were presented yesterday, and
Yes,
the
sir.
clerk has to comply with their process. The clerk of the court is separate from me. And so I've been told that Exhibit 8 is Exhibit 8, there's not an 8A and 8B.
Okay.
So going back to you, what were you telling me, sir?
Your Honor, the training materials that I'm referring to are quite voluminous, and to authenticate it, I thought it would be easier if I was able, with Your Honor's permission, to hand the witness a hard copy and have her authenticate rather than flip through. And I could have.
Have we gotten so technical that given up on 200 years of jurisprudence and that's the way we used to do it, absolutely. You may show it to the witness and she can look at it to verify it. I'm sorry for the commentary. I'm just a little taken aback that the way that I've always done it for the majority of my life is you're asking permission to do it that way. Absolutely, sir. You can approach, yes, for that purpose.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Kurt, the declaration's not part of that, correct? It's
It's just the training.
And I hear clicking and things that the exhibits are, I'm told, supposed to be clipped together without pages. They're supposed to be all clipped or stapled together without pages being removed or pulled apart. If we start doing that, it creates problems. So I heard something over there that sounded like the exhibit being taken apart.
As I said, Your Honor, it's a number of pages, so I didn't.
No, if she can just pull them over and look at them, then that's great. I just don't want to clip and loose papers,
Flying everywhere.
well, becoming missing in a question later. That's all I'm asking, please. So, did you understand what I'm talking to?
You want me to leave the clip on and flip it, sir?
Well said. Leave the clip on and flip it, please.
Ms. Onikite, you have been handed a document that's been marked for identification as Exhibit 8 in the court's record. This is does not include your declaration that is the cover for 8. But these are the training materials, and I'll represent to you that these are the training materials that you provided counsel for Maricopa's signature verification training. If you would just take a moment to look through it and tell me if it is a true and accurate copy of what you presented and what you received from Maricopa in the summer of 2022.
This is correct.
Your Honor,
Go ahead and move.
I would move to admit Exhibit 8.
Any objection?
No objection from the county.
Hold on just 1 second because I need to visit with the clerk on the.
It's just the discussion.
Attached that way.
Is
Is the declaration marked as a separate exhibit?
It is on our end, Your Honor.
Yes. That's the,
So we can,
yes, so yeah.
The actual exhibit mark does have the declaration attached to it, so the county would object to 8 being moved in if it includes the declaration, since she's here to testify.
it includes the declaration. We have no objection to not including the declaration.
Understand, but once an exhibit is marked, you don't pull pages out. What you have to do is create a new exhibit. I have no problem with that. Just designate the next number in line. We'll put a new tag on it, and it will be the entire exhibit minus the declaration.
Okay.
Okay, with that understanding, what will that number be? That'll be exhibit number 46, okay? So plaintiff has moved to admit exhibit 46, as I've stated on the record. Defendants, no objection.
No objection. 46 does not include the affidavit.
Correct. 46 is admitted. Proceed with the questioning, but make sure that this gets taken care of so the record's complete.
And just, I guess procedurally, the exhibit 8 is there. She's not testifying from exhibit 8. Does the court want her to use the actual exhibit the court has on file or something that counsel provided for her?
The exhibit, always.
But to the point of the exhibit,
We've now made it 46.
It's exhibit 46. Okay.
I can make this easier. Right?
Here's what's going to happen.
What?
At the next break, when I have to give the break for the court reporter, you either make a PDF copy, printing it out, and create exhibit 46, or somebody comes up with a copy of what's agreed. Do you have that?
I have exhibit what's now gonna be 46. It's double-sided, so we can just move. I
Okay.
just want to look at it and we can have it marked and then.
It's not supposed to be double-sided, but in a pinch, I'm gonna. Mr. Olson, you agree? It's accurate? What you have in your hand then, let's mark as Exhibit 46. Are you both agreed?
I'm fine with that, Your Honor.
Forget about the double-sided or two rule for right now. If you'll give it to the clerk, she's going to make a green tab. We're going to mark it 46, and then you're going to present it to the witness, Mr. Olson. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll make sure, yes, please. While she's doing that, for future reference, anything we present to a witness has to be one of the marked exhibits rather than some substantial equivalent or something else. Great. Okay. The witness now has Exhibit 46 in front of her, and that has been admitted in evidence. Proceed with further questioning.
Sure. Please turn up page 8432.
Ms. Onikite, if you would turn to, it'll be up on the screen as well, but it's the page marked 8-432 at the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see a slide at the top entitled Reviewing Signatures. Page 432.
Ma'am, if you're having a difficult time finding it, I'll have Mr. Olson come up and point you to it if you'd like.
Thank you, sir. I found it.
Found it. Excellent.
You see the slide that begins with, and you can look behind you, it's there as well. If you look back over your right. Is this a document that you reviewed in your training by Maricopa?
Correct.
And what do you think that the purpose of these training materials were for?
To make sure that we were following all of the laws and make sure that we were obviously doing our job.
And when you say you were doing your job, what job are you referring to?
Signature verification, we had a computer screen and it was for the VRAS. We would log in, get into VRAS, and then click start, and a batch of 250 green affidavits, well, one at a time would pull up, and then we would use the actual green affidavit that was sent in for.
Forgive me for interrupting.
Okay.
I want to just stick with the training right now and the purpose of what you were being trained to do. And so when you look at this exhibit, if you turn the next page, and you'll see at the bottom slide entitled Handwriting Analysis.
Correct.
And if you look at the second bullet point, and I'll read that for the record, the second bullet point at page 8433 states, in the context of the signature verification process for early voting, handwriting analysis is used to verify the identity of a voter by comparing the signature on an early voting affidavit against a known signature on the official voter registration file and past affidavit signatures. Was that your understanding of what you were learning to do?
Correct.
And when it talks about an analysis of the signature, what does that mean to you in the context of your training?
Well, we were looking for the way that the signature was either slanted to the right or the left, the beginning of the signature, the way their handwriting. It could be a loop in the very beginning with their name, or at the end, they did a little loop at the end.
And so, turn to the next page, please. If you turn to page 8434, are these examples of specific characteristics of a signature that you were trained to assess and analyze when you were making your comparisons of the two signatures?
Correct.
And there, if you just keep flipping through to 435, 436, there are a number of different examples here, correct?
Correct.
If you turn to page 8437, the slide entitled Broad Characteristics, Evaluating the Entire Signature. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
There are 8 bullet points of, what those 8 bullet points represent to your understanding of signature verification that you were trained in?
The type of writing, whether it be handwritten or if they were doing cursive writing, the spelling, the alignment, the overall size.
Are these all different factors that you were trained to assess in making a determination whether a signature on a ballot envelope could be verified with the signature on file with the state?
Yes.
If you would turn the page to 8438. You see where the slide entitled Broad Characteristics?
Correct.
Can you, and then the next several slides from 439, 440, all the way over to 441 talk about broad characteristics.
Correct.
What is your understanding of the purpose of assessing broad characteristics of a signature in conducting a signature verification?
I believe that each individual voter's signature, even when they get older, it does change slightly, but for the most part, it should stay the same.
And how would you utilize the characteristics that are identified in your training materials to analyze a voter's signature?
Well, as I stated before, a lot of them would be either slanted right or left, or maybe it's, again, not cursive, it was just hand printed.
Would you assess all the different characteristics?
Correct.
And then if you look over at slide on page 8441, which is up on the screen now, do you see where it says local characteristics?
Correct. The spacing and the size of their handwriting.
So when you say spacing, what are you referring to?
Maybe some signatures, they just flow all together, and others, they would actually have the first and the last name separated, a space in between.
And is that a characteristic that can tell whether a signature should match or not?
Correct.
If you would turn to the slide on page 8446. I'd like to discuss the equipment setup that Maricopa provided for you to evaluate signatures in the for early voting in the 2022 primary and 2022 general election. Do you see the slide at the bottom entitled Voter Signatures Accessing the Voter Signature Images?
Yes.
So when you were conducting signature review, were you looking at computer images or actual hard copies of the ballot envelope?
It was the hard copy that was scanned and was on the computer screen.
Okay. Can you describe for me and for the court how signature verification would work mechanically. Sitting in front of a computer screen, what would you do?
So we would come in every day, log into our computer and log into the VRAS system, the voter signature, and then we would click start and then new to bring up a batch of 250 signatures to go through, the green affidavits. Once we click start, an image would pop up. Once the image popped up, we were supposed to go through our 11 points to verify the name of the voter matched in the history from before. And it could have been a combination of voter registration forms or past green affidavit envelopes. And once we had verified the points, then we needed to scroll down and just look at the signature for characteristics that matched.
So when you say scroll down, what would happen to the computer screen when you scrolled down?
So you still had the recent green affidavit in front of you, but when you scroll down, you could see all the three that we were given, which again, I said was a combination of the voter registration form or past green affidavits that we would verify off of. So you would have to scroll down in order to verify the signature. So a lot of times I would scroll down very slowly and then scroll back up because some of them were very difficult. Once I verified the signature, if it was a signature that didn't match, then I would click exception, which meant rejection of that signature, which would then go to the level 2 managers for them to look at. If it was an approval, then I would press good and that would go on. And my understanding is that ballot would come from run back for ballot processing to process.
Can you describe the various levels of signature review at Maricopa County while you were employed?
So level 1 was mostly part-time employees of the county just for election. Level 2 were part-time employees that have done worked several elections, and they would verify. They actually had more signatures. They had the full history. So they would spend more time going through those signatures to verify if they could see a match in order to approve that ballot or that green affidavit.
Were there any levels above level 2?
My understanding there was a level 3, and I'm not sure who was handling level 3.
Were there any managers that oversaw your work or the other signature?
Correct. So we were advised several times that we were being, that we were being monitored and they were doing audits on all of us. And we were advised that if we were either approving too many or rejecting too many, that we would be called into the office and just talked to. If it happened a second time, we would be let go. So we were advised, that they were watching everything that we were doing.
Were you ever called into the office?
No, sir. I was actually assigned extra duties from, I guess, doing a good job from the primaries. They assigned me to do missing signatures. So if a green affidavit was sent in with no signatures, then I would scan all those green affidavit envelopes into the system for them to keep track of which ones came in with no signatures. And then I was given envelopes to stick the original green affidavit in the envelope with the letter stating that they forgot to sign their signature on the green affidavit form and that they had so much time to send it back. We gave a specific date. So I handled this every morning, probably for about an hour to an hour and a half when I first came in.
You mentioned you started off with the 2022 primary election performing signature review.
Correct.
And that was after a week of training, 8 hours a day, 5 days at 8 hours a day, correct?
We didn't, so when we first came in for the, are you speaking with the general or the primary? I apologize.
The primary.
Okay, so when I came in for the primary, we did the training, but then they sent a large group of us to the county recorder's office because they were running behind on new registration forms we handled, and also voters that moved. So they had sent out notices saying, are you still at this address? And then they would send it back in. So then we would go into the VMO8 to verify their information and then pass it on to whoever was in charge of us at the county.
When you talk about going into the VMO8, was that part of the signature review process or something else?
It was, but that was more at the curing process when we were done verifying signatures. These were the rejected ballots that the signatures were no good. And so we finished on the 11th is when we did the last signatures, and then we started going back into the history just to take another look first whether or not we could find a signature within all of their history. And once we did that, if we could not, then we would try to locate a phone number and contact the voter to verify their information over the phone.
For the primary, can you describe the setup Maricopa had for performing signature review with levels 1 and 2?
It was the same as the general, only they had more of a sense of urgency because we were getting so many ballots in, and we had a much smaller crew for the primary election. So we were working longer hours.
You said that during the primary you're working longer hours?
Yes.
And where was the sense of urgency that you mentioned? Was it the primary or the general?
The primary.
How many stations were set up by Maricopa for signature review?
During the primary or the general? During the primary, there was probably 6 to 7 in the second room and maybe 6 to 7 in the first room where I worked.
And so that's between 12 to 14 stations.
Correct, plus the 3 managers that were for second level that were on the side.
So that would be 15 to 17.
Correct.
And can you describe the setup for that?
It was pretty much the same. We focused in on handling all of the verification of the green affidavits. Whatever was rejected, we sent to level 2, and then they verified whether or not they could find a signature that matched. With the, am I allowed to, with the general, I felt more of a kind of not a sense of urgency like we did with the primary. And we worked literally to the very last day, to the very last second, where with the general, we ended on, would have been Tuesday the 14th at noon, they had us go home. Which Wednesday was the last day at 5. So we didn't understand why we were leaving early when there was ballots left in the bins. And we had asked the manager, are you sure that you want us to go home? Would you like us to, keep trying to call these voters to get these ballots cured? And they said no.
Do you have an understanding as to the number of ballots being processed for signature verification in the primary versus the number of ballots in the general election that were being processed for signature verification?
There was a lot less for the primary, and there was, I want to say close to 1.3 for the general, but we didn't have as many for the primary election
And you say 1.3 million?
for the general.
Can you describe for me the number of stations that were employed for the general election for signature review?
There was about 24 for the day shift, and that was split between room 1 and room 2. And then we also had a night crew coming in that they hired that worked from 3:30 to 7:30ish at night.
Were there the same number of level 2 signature verifiers in the general as in the primary?
Yes,
So that would be 3?
correct.
And tell me, you mentioned shifts. What shift were you on?
I was on the day shift,
And this is in the general.
correct. And I was also on the day shift for primary.
What were the hours for the day shift
For primary or general?
for general?
For the general, we started every morning at 7:30. And they usually wanted us out the door by 6:30, 7.
And when you say out the door, was that the first shift was out the door by 6:30 or 7, or was that the
Everyone, including night shift.
So when did the day shift end?
It was supposed to end at 4:35 in the afternoon, but then they were asking people to volunteer to stay. And so it was just maybe 2 or 3 of us. My counterpart that sat next to me stayed. And I,
When did the second shift begin and end?
3:30
And when did it end?
at about 7:30.
So at the same time.
Mhm.
How was it possible to have 2 shifts working at the same time with 24 stations?
Starting at 3:30 because half of my crew would leave. They didn't want to stay. So there was less of us there working.
So at any one time during a day, were there more than 24 level 1 signature reviewers during the general election?
Not that I am aware of.
How many, were there more than 3 level 2 signature reviewers during the general election?
To be honest with you, I know just of Andrew, William, and Jeff. I'm not sure who else was working level 2.
For the general election, could you describe your workload, meaning how many signatures you would review on a typical day?
So the batches were 250. I did keep a tally on a sheet. So each time I would finish going through a batch of 250, I would put a mark down. So every day I usually did between 6 to 8 batches of 250.
How did that compare to your workload during the primary?
Well, we stayed there much later. Some of us were there till 9 at night, some till 10. So we did a lot more as far as batches because of the long hours.
How many days a week was signature verification going on in Maricopa during the general?
The first couple weeks we didn't work the weekends, but the last couple of weekends prior to elections, we were there.
Was that Saturday and Sunday or just Saturday?
There was some Saturdays and Sundays. But I also worked, I was pulled to work in adjudication because they were short and had way too many adjudicated ballots. So a lot of times, even though we were let go at 7, I was there sometimes till 10:30 at night with the adjudication team.
Was there any way that the signature, level 1 signature verifiers and level 2 could keep track of the number of ballots that were going to be ready for review?
Can you state the question again? I'm sorry.
Was there any general notification in the room of the number of ballots that would be ready for review by levels 1 and 2?
So for the primaries, Celia Neighbor, the director, would send us an email every morning of how many ballots that we needed to verify the signatures. And then she also would put what we hadn't completed from the day before and added it to that number. So we got emails every day. For the general election, we didn't get emails. They actually had a whiteboard in the second room that they would write down the number of ballots that we needed to verify signatures. So I really didn't see the numbers that they were putting down because that was not my room. We didn't have the whiteboard in our room. But I know that they did write the number of ballots that we had to get through for the day.
Do you
On that
have
whiteboard.
any recollection as to generally what the number of ballots that were to be processed each day?
So I know for the first few weeks for the general, it was sometimes 50, sometimes 60, sometimes 70, those first couple weeks.
And is that about 50, 60, 70,000?
Yes, sorry.
Did you interact with the level 2 reviewers
I did.
during the general?
I did, yes. Mainly because we were having so many problems with signatures and the rejections that I would turn around and apologize and say, I am so sorry that I'm sending you these, because they were getting overloaded with signatures and they were getting frustrated.
And when you say they, are you referring to level 2 reviewers?
Yes.
And so how did you know they were getting frustrated?
Well, we would go out on breaks or at lunch, and Andrew and Jeff would complain about how many they were having to go through, and they didn't think they were going to be able to get through those signatures because there was too many and there was not enough of them. I do know there were times when rejected signatures that I did send to them, they actually sent them back to us because they got so overloaded for level 2. So, because we would ask the manager, I just looked at this signature and I rejected it. Why am I seeing the same signatures again? And so they would say, the level 2 managers are they've got too many to go through, so we're just sending them back to you to re-review and see if there isn't anything that matches.
Who told you that to re-review?
Usually it was either Tony, my supervisor, or Michelle would come in, or Celia, because it wasn't just me complaining, it was other people in my room that were complaining of how many, because we kept having to call the managers over to come and look at the signatures of how bad they were. They weren't matching up, and what do I do with this? So they would come over and just tell us, you need to be very cautious, you need to pay attention to what you're doing, and remember that whatever you reject or approve, you could be called in to testify. And I think that's why a lot of us were asking them to come over and look, because there was so many bad signatures.
How do you know that the signatures that had been sent up to level 2 were being sent back?
Because we asked, we had noticed ones that we had already rejected were being put back into the queue. So we asked, I just did this maybe like a half an hour ago. If it's a unique name, you're going to remember. And so a lot of us were stating, why are we seeing these? Is the system not working? What's going on? And we were told by Tony or Michelle or Loma or Celia that they kicked it back because level 2 had too many to go through. They just wanted to make sure, for us to go back through and really verify whether or not we couldn't find a match.
So who is Tony?
Tony was my direct supervisor.
And was he employed by Maricopa County?
He's a full-time permanent employee.
And you mentioned Celia,
Correct.
and who is she?
She was the director and she's was a full-time permanent employee.
And you mentioned a third person?
Michelle, she was also a full-time permanent employee.
What kind of pressure did you feel in processing signatures for signature verification during the general?
I think we all felt really pressured when they sent back what we had already reviewed, and we really didn't feel comfortable about approving what we had already rejected. We had already went through them. So, when we questioned them about it, they just told us, if you still don't feel like you can find a match, go ahead and reject it. And I did, because I did not feel comfortable approving something that I had already rejected. We'd already went through them.
Did you ever hear of the level 2 reviewers complaining about the number of ballots that were being rejected and sent up for them for level 2 review?
Yes. It was taking him quite a bit of time because he was having to go through Jeff, meaning Andrew and Jeff, were complaining because they were having to spend more time to try and locate a signature that would match throughout their history. And I asked, I apologized to them, especially for Andrew. He was there when we started in the morning, and the next day when he would talk to us, he was there till 9 or 10, sometimes 11 o'clock at night, trying to go through level 2. I know that Jeff and William always left at 5:30-ish. So he was left by himself to get through those for level 2.
During what period of time in the general election did these complaints occur?
All throughout. Especially for the newer people that hadn't worked the elections. They didn't feel comfortable with what they were seeing, and they were complaining. I know that sometimes I know Jeff was keeping track, like a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, because we were catching signatures of individuals that didn't even belong in the history. Meaning, say if it's a John Smith and it was a woman's name, and this wasn't a married couple, this was completely different names. So they told us to write down the voter ID, the name of the person, and to give it to Jeff, the second level manager, and he was keeping a spreadsheet of all of those signatures. And we were told they were going to clean up the voter history to try and get rid of those out of. Because we asked, how did these even possibly get into the history? They're not even the same. They're not the same name. They weren't a relative. How did this happen? The addresses were different, everything.
How do you feel your experience during the general election with the events you're just describing compared to other level 1 signature reviewers during the general election?
Objection speculation, Your Honor.
Lay some foundation if you're going to ask that.
Did you have discussions with the other level 1 signature reviewers while you were working in the general election?
We really didn't have discussions about those specific signatures. It was we were so very close that you could hear them call Tony or Michelle or Aloma over to show them that name did not belong in the history. And so that's when Celia came in and told us, you need to write down the name, the voter ID, and make sure that you give it to Jeff so that he can complete the spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet for us.
How did this affect the rate of processing of ballots in the general election? What you've just described, issues like that.
Objection speculation. I heard the comment or the question just generally, not just to the witness.
Okay, rephrase, please.
Did what you just described of having to talk with the managers about the ballots that shouldn't be there. How did that affect your ability to process signatures?
It made me really check to verify all the points that the voter that we had the green affidavit come in matched what we were looking in the history. So when we started getting them in there, I think we spent more time trying to really make sure that this was the correct voter.
Did you have discussions with your peers on breaks or anything like that? Or did you overhear comments by other level 1 reviewers during the general election?
Yes, they were complaining a lot about a lot of the bad signatures.
And the room that you were in, is it an open room or were there separate?
No, it's an open room. We had cubicles, but we could see each other, talk to each other.
During the general election, were all 24 stations filled during the day that you could observe?
Correct. There were no open seats.
And did that go from morning until the close of the shift in the evening?
No, once 5 o'clock hit, then there was less of us in room 1. Because we had several people that didn't want to stay overtime and went home.
Would that station seat then remain empty?
Yes.
Do you recall November 8th, Election Day?
Yes.
And can you describe what you saw happen on Election Day with the number of ballots that came in?
We didn't have very many ballots on Election Day, so a lot of us were pulled to work in other departments. We maybe had a few thousand to go over in the morning, and then once we finished, Floyd, my co-partner that sat next to me, was a Democrat, and so they usually, if we had low numbers, they sent the 2 of us to go over and work adjudication. And then others were sent to SEB, which is the Special Elections Board, because they were busy.
What happened after Election Day?
The
Election Day being November 8th.
The very next day, we got bombarded with, I'm going to say, close to 298,000 ballots that we had to go through. It's very overwhelming.
Did you have discussions with the level 2 reviewers about this?
I think mainly just because they were complaining and we would apologize for sending over the rejected signatures, that they were getting several. Again, a couple of them would say, you know, you guys are spot on. Don't stress. Don't worry. You're doing it right. We're also not finding a match.
And you mentioned earlier that signatures were being kicked back from level 2 to level 1.
Correct.
Did that happen during this period when you, as you say, you were bombarded with ballots?
Yes.
Can you describe in more detail what happened?
Just that we would be going through signatures and then we would notice one that we had just went over that had been kicked back because level 2 got too overwhelmed with their queues. And so they would come in and say, we are sending back the level 2 manager queue to you to just check it a second time and make sure you're not missing anything.
Do you know who made the determination to send the ballots back from level 2 to level 1?
You know, when we get up and say something to tell me, I'm assuming it was Celia. I cannot say that for sure, though. I just know that it was kicked back to us.
How did you feel when ballots were being kicked back from level 2 to level 1?
Well, it's just adding on the same work that we'd already done. And most of us rejected them and sent them back to level 2.
And when you say most of us, who are you referring to?
Within our group in room 1, they were complaining.
How many were complaining that when you say a group of us?
Maybe 6, 7.
Do you know what happened to the signatures that had been sent back? If they were re-rejected, what happened to them?
I don't know, because I could not see what level 2 managers were doing.
How long did it take to process the 298,000 or so ballots that you say came in on November 9th?
I know that we finished on Friday, the 11th.
Did it surprise you that that number of ballots were processed so quickly?
Yes,
Why?
because it takes time to actually scroll through and go through those signatures. And the rejection, it takes even longer for the level 2 manager to go through the full history to try and find a match.
Between November 9th and that Friday, how many level 1 signature reviewers did you see on those 2.5 days working each day?
Everyone was there, so it would have been the full 24.
And how long were the work days on November 9th, 10th, and 11th?
These, again, they made sure that we were out of there no later than 7. Everybody had to leave.
And when you say 7, you're talking about 7 p.m.?
Yes, sir.
So, to your knowledge, what did everybody leave at 7 p.m.?
To my knowledge, yes, including the night crew.
So, to your knowledge, there were no level 1 reviewers after 7 p.m.
Correct.
And that was for the 9th, 10th, and 11th of November.
Correct. I know that when we got those numbers in, they had advised us that they had, because at the county recorder office, they had brought them over and had them trained by the signature specialist so that they could verify signatures. So I know that they told us, Celia came in and told us that they were also working on it at the county recorder's office, and also the special elections board out in their building where they were working, they were also verifying signatures out there.
Were you told why the normal level 1 reviewers were told to go home after 7 p.m. and the signature review function was performed at the county recorder's office?
No, we thought it was odd.
Why did you think it was odd?
Well, because we had observers that were constantly watching what we were doing, but there was, I'm assuming, no observers there who was watching what they were doing. I don't know. We just thought it was, we thought they would come to where we worked at, and maybe they set up in a different area for them to verify signatures, but they didn't. They just told us they had the regular county recorder employees working signature bear to try and get through all of those.
Did during the primary, you had said, I believe there was a sense of urgency during the primary.
Correct. They wanted to get as many ballots once the election was over, cured. So meaning all the rejected ballots that the signatures didn't match, they wanted them as many as possible to be cured, meaning we were looking up in the VMO8 system to go through their full history, and then if we could not find one that matched, then we would look for a number to call if it wasn't on the green affidavit envelope, We would look in the history for a phone number and try and contact the voter to verify.
During the primary, are you aware if the signature verification process was performed at the county recorder's office or any other location beyond the MTech?
For the primaries, they didn't tell us whether or not they were doing it. They did for the general because we had received so many green affidavit envelopes in from the night of the election.
Would you have been, how willing would you have been to work extended hours on November 9th, 10th, and 11th to process these additional ballots?
We would have stayed late, but again, you know, if they sent us home at 7, most of the time, Floyd and I, my partner that was a Democrat, we would run in and work adjudication till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Did you work late, or strike that, did level 1 signature reviewers work past 7 p.m. during the 2022 primary to review signatures and verify them?
Yes.
How late?
Sometimes 8, sometimes 9, sometimes 10. It just varied on how many we had left over. Because usually they didn't want any more than 2,000 to 3,000 left in the queue for us to get to in the morning with what was coming in the next day.
Did anyone else express concern? Let's strike that. Were there signature verification workers at level 1 that you know worked the primary with you and were also working the general?
Yes, both in room 1 where I worked and also in room 2.
Do you know approximately how many level 1 reviewers worked both the primary and general?
Maybe at the most 10.
Are you aware of anyone else expressing concerns about why on November 9th, 10th, and 11th, the MTech, the facility for processing and verifying signatures, people were told to go home at 7 p.m., level 1 reviewers, for example?
Yeah, we were concerned because there was so many of them to get through. And we actually, several of us asked if we could stay and help with the process, but they said no.
And when you say they said no, who is they?
Celia, Michelle, Tony, Aloma.
Earlier you testified that there was a board and it showed sometimes 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 ballots to be processed each day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if that board was utilized during the November 9th and 10th and 11th?
I don't know for sure. I was not in that room.
After November 11th, did you continue working in any, was there any level 1 signature review going on after November 11th, to your knowledge?
No, we actually started to cure the ballots, meaning we went into the VMO8 and looked through all the history. They brought in bins of ballots and they gave us a red bin for rejected signatures, a green bin for ones that we were able to find the signatures that matched. And then the white ones were ones that I think the white ones were just that they brought them in for us to pull stacks to bring to our desk.
When did you end your work with Maricopa on the 2022 general election?
That would have been the 15th at noon. They sent us home.
Do you know whether all the ballots had been completed curing at that time?
No.
What-
There was several bins left over. I know there was several in our room, and we asked the manager, Paloma, and Tony, are you sure you don't want us to stay to complete our work? And she said no.
And when you say there were several bins, do you have an idea how many ballots were left over?
In our room, I'm going to estimate 6 to 7, because we had about 7 bins in our room left over. I don't know what was left in the second room, but I know there was many, because they were also working on them.
And when you say 6 to 7, is that 6 to 7,000?
Correct. They were the very large mail bins, and they had them clear full, stuffed.
Did you have any discussions with your colleagues at level 1 signature reviewers about being sent home?
Yes, we were wondering why they were sending us home when there was still many to cure, and we still had one more day.
If you all were sent home, who was going to do the curing? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Did that ever happen during the primary, 2022 primary election?
No, as I stated, we stayed till the very last second to do the curing process. We were running. We were making phone calls. We were checking through the history. We were, because for the primary, they weren't just curing their ballots through our phone calls. They were also curing them through text message. They were curing them through emails, meaning they would send in a copy of their photo ID for us to verify their signature. And then we would have to run, we would take those forms that Celia and Michelle and Tony had printed out and attach it to the ballots that were in alphabetical order. And then that would go in a separate bin for them to come and grab. They would stamp it and then forward it on to Runbeck.
Your Honor, we will.
Pardon me?
We're finished right now, Your Honor, with that.
Okay, no further questions on direct.
And Your Honor, I'm ready to begin, but I'm cognizant of the court reporter's time. It's 10:40, so I'm about for an hour and a half, so I don't know if the court wants to break here.
Yes, we'll do that right now. Okay, we'll take a 15-minute break and resume after that.
Can I leave this here?
Yes, ma'am. Leave it exactly there, and you can take your break and stretch your legs, whatever you'd like.